Hi, we're back here from AmericanElgin.com, and today we're going to be discussing three watches from the Lord Elgin 30 jewel thin line or thin model C, line up letter C as in Charlie. These are watches that were made in Elgin, Illinois at the famous old Main plant near downtown Elgin. Between approximately 1959 and 1963. These are watches which were at among the highest end watches that Elgin made. These were marketed under the Lord Elgin name. That was the top of the line luxury brand for Elgin. They were part of a series that was the only American designed and made automatic watches. So Elgin was the only American maker considered to have ever designed and made automatic watches in the United States. Automatic meaning self-winding. So these watches, if you were to take them apart, these have a one-piece case, but if you were to take this case apart and you would see, if you could see on the inside of the back of the watch, you would see there is a sort of half moon or kind of half circle pendulum or weight, also called a rotor, which spins around through a central pivot point using in a 360-degree rotation. And that movement while you're wearing the watch or walking around, moving your wrist or walking around, that's what winds the watch. So you do not need to use the little crown, the little knob on the right side of the watch. And these watches, the 27 jewel Elgin and the related 30 jewel Lord Elgin, which is what we're looking at today, were the second generation of automatic watches that Elgin made. The first generation was made about a decade earlier, around 1950, 1951. And those were, they used a different technology called a bumper automatic. The pendulum didn't swing around in a full 360-degree rotation. It spun between two different points and bounced against these little bumpers to wind the watch. It was not as efficient. So Elgin, with these watches here that we're looking at now, in 1959 introduced this technology, which is the modern technology for automatic watches used by pretty much every, or at least the vast majority of watchmakers in the world today that make automatic watches. And Elgin, as mentioned, was the only U.S. company that made automatic watches in general, or these types of advanced full rotor automatics in particular. And they were only made for a couple of years, and they were very high-end and very expensive watches. So they're quite rare today. These were luxury watches. These were not, these were not the cheaper watches. These were quite expensive. So these watches were priced between $84.50 and $89.50. So between about $85 and $90. And that was a lot of money in 1960 when these came out. So the average, the minimum wage in America in 1960 was $1 an hour, $1. And the average American worker made about $50 a week. So these cost almost around $90, $85 to $90, which is almost 2 weeks' wages pre-tax for the average American. And at this price point of $89.50 or even $84.50, they were only $10 to $15 cheaper than some of the solid gold Lord Elgin and Elgin watches that were being sold at the time, which started at $100. At the time, gold was not quite as expensive, and so these watches, which had they were not solid gold, they had they used a material that was called gold filled. So if we can look here, we can see here in the reflection, 10 karat gold filled. And what that means is this is not some kind of a low end kind of gold plating that you might see somewhere that will come off after a couple of uses. This gold filled, basically, the way to think of this is like a gold shell that was welded to the brass underneath, the base metal underneath, designed to last decades without wearing through. And these watches use the case made by a well-known maker, and that is I believe was Ross. These were made by Ross, a watch case company out of New York. There's no name on here, but if you were to take the watch apart, you'd see the Ross name, and the letter R there is with the number. That's their serial number for these cases. Ross didn't make too many cases for Elgin in this line of watches, but this is one that they made. And back then, be aware that many watch companies made the movements, meaning the gears, the 30 jewel part of the watch, and the dial, the part that has the numbers written on it and the hands and all that. They made all that, but then they would put all that into the case, which is the sort of the thing the watch sits in. So this is the case back, and these are the lugs. This is all part of the case, and that was made by a different company. Omega did this, and other companies did this also that sold high-end watches. So there are 3 examples of this particular C model, Lord Elgin C, and these 3 have the case made by Ross Watch Case Company out of New York, as mentioned, and they use case reference number 9816. So if you were to take the watch apart, you'd see that number inside there. And there apparently is another case number that was used with these, reference 2431, although we don't have an example of that one. These have this case is 33 millimeters in diameter, rather substantial. It is not super thick, so it was a rather thin case, and these were called thin line or thin. That was the marketing name for these. And we'll take a look at some of the advertising for these watches. So we'll start first with watch here. This is, as we can see, this is the same watch. It has a gorgeous design, very classic. 30 jewels self-winding. You can see on the bottom of the dial, it says American made. This is a one-piece case, meaning that if you were to open the watch, you need to take out the crown and do a couple different maneuvers to get the crystal to come out, and then the entire mechanism comes out. As you can see, this is a beautiful case. This watch was hardly ever worn. Unfortunately, there was some dummy who got his hands on this and tried opening it with a blade or something here, so they damaged it. That's unfortunate. So please, if you own one of these, do not try to take it apart yourself. Please go find a watchmaker who knows what they're doing, and don't scuff up such a beautiful case. But anyway, the main thing is it looks very nice from the front, really immaculate, gorgeous. I mean, look at the numbers and the cream dial. This is just an absolute rocket, this watch. And if we look here, we can see a bit more information on the watch. Lord Elgin 30, thin 30C. So 30 refers to the jewels. Self-winding, shock and water resistant, etc. Now the jewels, to be clear, these are not ornaments. These are not jewels like, you wear like earrings or something, or a diamond ring. No, the jewels refers to working jewels, and these are, in the case of Elgin, these are typically synthetic sapphires. And there's actually an interesting video showing how Elgin made these in-house around World War II. These are made later, but they're synthetic sapphires or synthetic gems. Which are quite small, and they're shaped a certain way, very highly polished, and they're used basically in the same way that a ball bearing is used in a mechanical device. That is to reduce friction between metal components, to extend the life of other metal parts, like the gears inside the watch, and also to make the watch more precise in timekeeping. And that is a really important factor here. These watches, specifically these 30 jewel Elgins, these had the highest jewel count of any Elgin watch ever made in the 1 century plus that Elgin made watches in the United States, from the Civil War until 1969. And these weren't even made that long. They were only made 1959 through 1963, for about 4 years. And the watch movement inside here, the so-called 760 caliber movement, the one with 30 jewels, this is considered a chronometer-quality movement. And that means this is designed to be extremely precise, to a level of permissible deviation of at most a couple seconds per day. And this is a fully automatic watch with all the gears and everything else. It's not a battery operated watch. This is a classic automatic watch that you wind, and the power comes from the winding of it. So very precise and ultra high quality. Chronometer is, that's what you see, for example, on the dial of a Rolex. It's a certified chronometer. These are chronometer quality. These are of the quality of chronometer, and that's according to the RAND database. That's the world's leading watch movement database, and others who've looked at this who concur in that opinion. So that's the first one. Very nice design. And if we scroll down here, actually, we'll take a look at this as just a quick point of reference here. So the case number is 9816 for this watch, and then we see the 0.1. And the 0.1 refers to the system that we use at AmericanElgin.com for classifying these watches. So this is dial variation number 1 for this. So this is 9816, that's the case number, and then the 0.1 refers to the specific dial variation with the 12 numerals and so on. Now we'll look at the next watch, and this is a gorgeous one. This has a black dial, exact same case, 9816. And this is the 0.2 variation for the dial. So the black dial here has this. This is the second version of the dial that's available with these watches that we're aware of. And you can see this has these stick markers and very thin hour, minute, and second hands. And in this case, in this situation, the very thin hour and minute markers actually works very well. There is a different version of the Lord Elgin Model A 30 jewel that we talked about in a different video that has very thin hour markers with a cream dial. It doesn't really work quite as well. It's not quite as visible here. And also there's a 27 jewel Elgin Model A that has the same issue. It has a cream color dial with extremely thin hour and minute hands. And it's kind of hard to read, to be honest, although it looks pretty cool. Here, you get the benefit of it looking extremely cool. And also it has a great deal of contrast against the gold against the black. And so it just pops. And you can see very bottom of the dial, American made. That's just like phenomenal, very impressive. 30 jewel self-winding Lord Elgin. Again, made in the US, very rare, very expensive when it was new, and really unknown to many watch collectors who associate Elgin with pocket watches, when they made some great ones of those, with a lot of watches in square cases from like the 30s and 40s. And this is really part of a technological tour de force that the Elgin Watch Company put out into the market in the late 50s, along with a couple other watches that were just from different lines. They were just incredibly impressive and really not known to a lot of collectors. American watch collectors, of course, know all about Hamilton. They made high-end watches. They never made automatics, though. And Elgin, because of its scale, it was the first watch company in the world to ever make 50 million watches with jeweled movements. It's a phenomenal number. These are the jeweled movements, the high-quality mechanical movements. They were able to do things like this, and they eventually ran into some trouble in the mid-50s. Not so much due to their watch business. In fact, the financial problems apparently were due to their defense business. So, and as a defense contractor, they made things like components for guided missiles that the U.S. was making in the 50s. They were also, and this is very impressive, and this speaks to how impressive Elgin National Watch Company was, they were given the contract to build the central timing mechanism for the Apollo space program, for the moon rocket, and that went to the moon. And it was to design and build all of the time critical, time sensitive devices that were needed to make that thing run properly. And that's as anyone knows who's ever looked into the Apollo moon program, everything there was choreographed to the millisecond. And so timing was an absolutely central component of making that work. And Elgin got the contract. It was a subcontractor of North American Aviation in the Apollo moon program. So again, that just gives you an indication of how highly regarded Elgin was in the high-end stuff they did. And again, back to the watch though, this is just an absolutely gorgeous dial. It's only one of what appears to be only two watches in this 30 jewel automatic lineup that were offered with a black dial. So the other one was the Model A, and this is the Model C, and this is just an absolutely gorgeous example of that. And this is dial variation number 2. Finally, we'll look at this third one down here, and this is, again, another C model. This one has a very characteristic, a bit more classic design. It's got the 12, 3, 6, and 9. Again, the dial is very cool, very nicely made. It's got a lot of texture on it, actually. You can see from a certain angle, it's not just, the minute markers are not just drawn in. They actually are a bit three-dimensional. You can see they kind of stand up from the dial itself. And we'll read the description. This version was, this is version 9816.3. So this is, and the 0.3 is the way we categorize these, AmericanElgin.com, as mentioned. And so this is dial variation number 3. Again, accurately described as extremely accurate 30 jewel self-winding, $84.50. A lot of money back in that time, as we talked about. And this, of course, has that same very, very attractive case made by Ross, 10 karat gold filled, very nice, beautiful single one-piece case. Let's reassemble all these watches here, and we will take one last look at these beauties before we wrap this up. Again, these are the Lord Elgin thin, or sometimes called thin line 30 jewel Model C, and these are the 3 dial variations that are known to us. And if you'd like more information on these, please check out AmericanElgin.com or check us out on Instagram at American Elgin. Thank you.